Very good morning to you again, Professor Dr. Peter Baofu, an American missionary and an author of 144 new theories, as well as they are brought out in 178 books. You are a graduate from Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and you've been throughout the world and everything like that. So we talk about science, social science, natural science, and any other type of science, and even with your visions as well. We're now coming to the Pacific now. It's a very big topic here, with the geopolitics of the Pacific becoming the middle of the world of global thinking right now because of the way it is developing. China, big power, coming to the Pacific with all what their offerings and everything and all that. America, being a long-time friend of the Pacific, is coming out as well. And the Pacific are poor. They are looking to who will give them the best benefit of everything in there to survive, being number two in the world with all this climate change and everything and all that. How is your vision? What is your vision and your look at this concept at the moment?
First, thank you for having me. I think that's a very interesting topic, a very timely topic, because nowadays we have the geopolitical rivalry between the U.S. and China. About 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, when I was working for my PhD at MIT, my doctoral dissertation was about postmodernity and what is going to happen after the postmodern world, in which I already predicted that China will be the dominant superpower on Earth. A few years later, about 20 years ago, I wrote another book, and I proposed a more detailed theoretical construction of the new world order to come. So that is the one that I was trying to predict, that not only China, but India, they too will become the dominant, what I call the hyper empires on Earth. They will be the dominant ones. The US and the European Union will be the second tier. That's my prediction, based on many different factors, a comprehensive analysis of major cultural, social, natural, mental, and all the factors. So that is something which I predicted a long time ago, and a few years ago, I also predicted another Cold War, this time between the US and China. I call that the Second Cold War. At that time, people did not pay attention to me because there was no Second Cold War yet. It also come to be true. So I have been working on this for quite some time, and this is a major challenge of our time. How are you going to deal with the rising power and the established power? The danger over here is that, as is always the case in human history, is that when you have an established power and you have a rising power, two of them somehow do not get along because they are competing for the same domination. In fact, this is exactly what happened between the UK and the US more than 100 years ago. It's the same thing between France and the UK, between France and Germany. So there's the danger over here. In the case of the Pacific Islands, as you said, this is a poor region. Many of the country over here is very small and very poor. Let me give you one example. You mentioned the school that I went to, MIT. MIT, the student population has more population than the entire population of Tuvalu, which is a country in the Pacific Islands. Tuvalu has only about 10,000 people. The entire population, which is less than the number of students in my school in the US. Now, you understand how small, how tiny you are. So that is a major challenge. Now, before I go any further, I just let you have your response, and then we can discuss more.
Okay, this very fine and how your predictions are coming in, and you are basing it on all these things, natural and social and all other elements coming into that now. And now they are coming in with their influence. There's a sphere of influence around these areas, and they're bringing in together their armory to show their power, which we're not interested in.
Which one was?
The Pacific is not interested in their armory and all that.
Okay,
They're
understand.
interested in surviving.
Yes. This is a good question in the sense that that is often a conflict between opposing interests. Okay. Even before we talk about China, before the rise of China, even over here in Tonga and also in the Pacific regions, you have been dominated too, like Australia and New Zealand, and also the U.S. Your neighbor Samoa, Eastern Samoa, is still occupied by the U.S. You see that many of the local regions were colonized, not just by the UK, France, and US, and all that, even by Australia and New Zealand. In fact, Samoa was colonized by New Zealand, and Australia was still occupied some of the islands, quite a number of them. And if you look at the Pacific Ocean, there are many, many different islands, more than 10,000 of them. The majority of them are not independent nation states. They are still occupied territories of the former colonial powers. You look at the map of the Pacific Ocean, all those islands, many of them are occupied by foreign powers. We talk about Australia, New Zealand, the UK, France, Netherlands, the US, and all that. So even before the geopolitical rivalry that we are talking about now, this region has been a hot spot by major powers. There is a conflict of interest here. Now, some of these countries, there are not many of them. Last time I counted, it was only about 11 or 12 different countries which become independent. But you still have so many islands left, more than 10,000 of them. Okay, so yeah, there is a major conflict of interest because you are interested in survival, economic well-being, you said, but they are interested in colonial domination and neo-colonial domination nowadays. So this is a major tension. So how do you deal with that? That is the conflicting interest, and also another one is that the major powers too, they are also competing among themselves. It's not just that it's between the small ones and the big ones. Even among the big ones, they are also competing among themselves, including in this case China and the US, and also the small ones are also competing among themselves too. They have also different interests, for example. So yeah, this is a major thing that you have to consider. In my previous interview, and also in Samoa and Fiji and all that, I provide another solution. There are different solutions to any of this. I think that it's very important, and also in my book that I told you, the title of the book is called Beyond the World of Titans and the Remaking of World Order. And I said that different regions, in this case the Pacific region, is sandwiched between the opposing powers. So how do you survive? This is the same situation in Ukraine right now, in Georgia, for example. I always propose that you have to be nice to both, because you cannot fight them. They are too big for you. But if you side with one group against the other side, that is going to happen to you in Georgia and Ukraine. You have a war, because the other power will not accept it. So what do? You behave like Switzerland. For example, you are neutral, but you are nice to both. You do business with both. You don't pick a fight with any of them. You try to be nice to all of them, do business with all of them, and you maximize the benefit from all. But if you side with one group and against the other group, you will be dominated by the other group. But if you side with this group against this group, then vice versa. So a wise way for small countries like you is to nice to both, but not to like sign a military alliance of one against the other, but then you be dominated by one. In fact, what Solomon Islands did is very interesting. Solomon Islands, one of your neighbors here, they signed a security pact with Australia a long time ago. But now they signed a new one with China. Why? They want to balance out. Because more and more people in the Pacific Islands, I have been in quite a number of them, I know there are some resentment against Australian and New Zealand domination in many of the economic, social, and political life in these countries, and also in many other countries in this region. So they try to balance out. In fact, there are more and more people that speak out in some of these islands that it's time to get away from the post-colonial domination by external powers, not just the U.S. in this case or China, even but Australia and New Zealand. So this is something that you have to work on. This one solution. Another solution I proposed to them that in my books and also in my previous interview is that I think they need to unite together and work together. The Pacific Islands Forum is a good example, but they are very divided. Let me give you some examples. Last year, Australia signed a contract for some nuclear submarines by some nuclear submarines from the U.S. Now, that is a violation of the Pacific Creed, that we should be nuclear free. You see that? So different countries pursue their own interest. So what I'm proposing is that the small islands, the small countries, they should work together as a group.
They are meeting right now.
Yes.
Actually speaking.
Yes. But they are often very diverse. And yes, it's easy to talk about unity and cooperation, but to do it is, in fact, Vanuatu just signed a security pact with Australia under pressure because of the economic dependence of Australia, and also the U.S. now is hurrying to renew some of the treaties with some of the islands, let's say in Polynesia. So everyone is in a hurry and trying to put all these islands under their control.
But that's why the Pacific Island Forum's meeting right now. This is a retreat before the big meeting later on in the year, which will be held in Tonga, in the Cook Islands. And they're talking they are more united now than ever before because of Japan going on to putting the West into the Pacific.
Yeah.
But at the same time, China is watching from the side because they foreign secretary to the whole of the Pacific last year. And straight after that, the vice president visited the Pacific as well, offering similar or better things than China, because China is bringing in loans with the Belt and Roads program instead of coming back against it now when they are taking ports and airports and things like that from other countries in Africa, Southeast Asia, and maybe in the Pacific soon. But that's thinking there. Where do you come in there?
This is also a question for many other countries. I was also in Africa, in Latin America, and some of the nearby regions which are also affected by that. What China is offering is something that Africa needs. It's not because, the Africans are not so innocent and stupid as people may think that they are. In fact, they are quite smart and clever in terms of getting the resources that they need. The reason is because Africa, I just give it an analogy, has been neglected by Western powers for decades already. They are only interested in colonizing them, exploiting them, but they are not helping the local people to develop economically. You go to Western Africa, there's a widespread resentment against the French post-colonial domination. Formally, they become independent, but France is still controlling many of them financially, economically, politically, and many other, even the military bases is all over. But many of these people in the Western African countries are interested in their own development, economic well-being. They don't want any of this. The something about the Pacific regions, like Tonga in this example. Why? Because China is attractive to many of them because China is able to provide what they need, let's say economic infrastructure, economic development, which has been neglected by many of the major powers which have been dominating in this region. Only until recently, all of a sudden, they become very interested in you and ask for, trying to provide all this kind of military aid, economic aid. Obviously, the more money coming in because they are competing. They want to keep China out. So from your own standpoint, I think it's not necessarily bad. It's exactly what I mean. You try to be in between and you maximize your benefits from both, but without being reliant on one, because then you'll be dominated by the other one, but then you will be exploited by them. because they don't have the power to fight back if you behave like that. Look at Ukraine. Ukraine becomes a proxy war right now between the West and Russia. And the country is being destroyed at this moment that I'm talking about. Is that good for you? If you are the Ukrainians, no. So they did exactly, don't think that is necessarily a bad thing, because if you look at human history, things happen often with some good reason. It don't just happen because it just happened. There must be some reason for the thing to happen, because of the social, economic, cultural, whatever conditions which become available and mature for that thing to happen. That's why China is coming in, because it's providing some of the social, economic things that you need. The same in Africa too.
But don't you look at China that is doing a new colonialism?
No, not in the sense, Sam, because the word colony, by the way, people sometimes use the word incorrectly. If I treat you as a colony, that means that I enslave you. Okay? Look at we've talked about the European colonialism. What do? They come in, they took all your resources, they plunder your resources without paying you. And they enslave you. Okay? And they control your political government. Okay? And you set all the military bases, whatever that might be. You are subject to the domination and subjugation. You have no say on that. Okay? Many of them were also killed if you go out and protest. China is not doing any of this. Buy and sell. They come in, there's something in Africa, there's something over here too. You have something to sell, they buy it. Okay? And they pay you.
But what about the loan traps in a way?
What about the what?
The loan traps. They're giving free loans, and then they have seized how many? Sri Lanka, in Africa, there are 2 airports in there, and 2 ports in Eastern Africa, in other places.
By the way, it's also not to the extent that you are thinking. We talk about the debt trap. I think that's a good example. But people often do not look into the data. More than 2/3 of the debt trap that we are talking about is not because of Chinese loans. It's because of Western loans. Many of them are private, and Western countries don't talk about it. Look at the data one more time. The Chinese loan in many of these countries is a tiny portion of the total amount of debt that they have accumulated, and many of them.
Nothing in the Pacific.
Well,
Nothing.
I'm talking about the global.
No, you can't use the Pacific as an example about that total war. The Pacific is so different, very different. We have no resources except for fish that runs around in the sea, and that's it.
So what? Okay, fine. So
what they are trying to do is to, when I used to colonize the Pacific and all that, he said so that they can set up like what they're doing on the islands in the South China Sea and all that, to build military bases in there because they want to dominate the world. It's against America at the moment.
Okay, it's very simple. What you are saying is already answer your own question. You say you have no resources. So what do? You don't want them? Oh, fine, kick them out. And then now what?
But it's them still coming.
Okay,
Australia, New Zealand, and America is coming out.
Okay, so you are answering your own question. You have no resources, but what do? Look, I'm comparing the alternatives that you have. Okay, this is the same question people in Africa and also in Latin America and the Asian countries ask me on interview about the same question. I say, okay, fine. Look into the data. If you think that's so bad, what's your option? What's your alternative? Kick them out. Very easy. You have the choice, but you keep asking them to come in. Look at Zimbabwe, many of the countries now in Africa. Each time they don't pay the loans, they ask China for cancellation. Debt cancellation. In fact, there's a meeting right now going on, and between the G-something countries, they are asking China to cancel all this debt too. And China has been doing that for many of these countries, but now to the point that China now is reluctant to give them any more loans because they know at the end of the day they will say that track, cancel, colonial. Now even the Chinese banks now are reluctant to give them any more money because they know they will not pay back. So look, if you are the bankers, is the one who want to do business, you lose in the end. there's not a good profit for you project. So the same thing about those countries. Look, international parties, people don't do that for you for free. They do that for their own interest. And you do this too also for your own interest. You ask them to come in because you want this to benefit you. You don't do this because you want to empower China. You do this for you, and they do that for themselves. So if you don't like the deal, fine. What is your other option? Australia, New Zealand, the U.S., but you have been complaining too. I don't mean you personally, based on the conversation and the previous interview that I have, people are also complaining that they don't want to be dominated by that. By the way, just in case you do not know, many of you send workers to Australia, New Zealand, and US, and many of them, what did they do? Do they have a high-end job with the president, the CEO, the chancellor, or so on, so on, so on? No, you do all the dirty work. And I just learned a new word. Forgive me if I mention that. I spoke to this guy from Samoa. I met him, and he told me that he went to work in Australia. He was the supervisor of a company in Australia, and he had to teach some of the local white Australians about certain things to run the company for their own products because they don't know. And the local white Australians, you know what they tell him? They say, "You don't tell me what to do, you coconut."
Yeah.
Okay, now I just learned this term. And he said that it's difficult for him because they look down on him because he's not an Australian, he's not a white Australian. This is a pervasive problem among many of the local people in the Pacific Islands. They are resentful for this kind of domination by the former colonialists against them. Okay? So they want to get out of it too, but at the same time, they don't have the resources. They don't have the capital. They don't have the development to get out. So what should you do? China now is another source of opportunity. Okay? They are not perfect. We have to always scale the benefits and the cost. I'm just saying that there are costs and benefits too. But the economic growth of Africa has been growing. Much of that is also because of all this infrastructure provided by China. Look, you go to Ethiopia. Okay, they are growing fast, and part of the reason is because of all the Chinese infrastructural help and other economic help, and people are very grateful to them. When I went to Africa, people do not know that I'm from the U.S. They look at me, they thought that I'm from China. Sometimes some of them even come and say thank you to me. I say, thank you for what? They say, for your own device, and now we have a job. I met a lady on the street. She was selling some kind of small thing, cigarette, small thing that, people on the street, they go and carry like that, and they walk to me. And they say, you're from China. And I said, I'm not she said, thank you to me for all this. I said, I have nothing to do with this. But people are grateful. So yes, there are some costs. It's not free. But I'm saying that remember, they are not your father. They are not your government. They come here also for their own benefit, and you do the same thing too. You take all of this also because you want to get something out of it for yourself too. They can sit there and complain about you, that how come you don't care about them, and then you sit here, you complain about them, how come they don't care about you and only care about the benefits. But it's life. The same about the colonialists. They come to you, they exploit you, they conquer you, they enslave you. They don't care about you, they care about the benefits. So your job as a policymaker, whoever you are, you have to scale the cost and the benefits. But if you focus too much on the cost and ignore the benefits, you lose. It's destructive. You have to balance out correctly. China is no good example. You don't have a lot of resources. So what do? What's your alternative? Doing the same thing that you have been doing, then you will not get any much better.
There's the thing of joining together as one unit.
Exactly, that's why I've just proposed this one solution, but the problem is, and many of them are not united. It's easy to talk about unity, it's easy to talk, easy to say, but in reality, each of them is pursuing their own interests.
Fair enough, you have the
See, you have to look into the reality of life here. It's not so easy. I have been in many of them, and sometimes I think that people get caught up with the rhetoric, but they don't look into the data. Now, look, the economic collapse in Sri Lanka if you look into Western mass media, they blame that on China, but that's not because of China, that's because of the American monetary policy, which has been increasing interest rate, okay? And that's caused a lot of capital outflow out of Sri Lanka, and the currency collapsed, and they could not pay anymore because now that the currency becomes low. This is one of the major reasons, by the way, that many countries now are looking for alternative into a reserve currency away from the euros and the dollars, because it's hurting the economy. You see that is another economic problem, major problem now. Even Saudi Arabia, even UAE, even Qatar, for example. We are not talking about countries which are anti-American. We are talking about some of the American allies. Now they are looking for alternative reserve currency. They don't need to depend on US dollars, because it's weaponizing the American currency, and some of the economy are collapsing. You see that? So this is some of the things that I think that you need to look into the data and see what should you do, what's your alternative. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's not necessarily a good thing. You have to balance them out, cost and benefit.
The other thing, like you learned from Samoa, time is running out, about coconut, Tonga was never colonized.
Yes.
So there's a difference from the rest of it.
Yes, but it's not the colonial colonization. I'm talking about the post-colonial domination. That's what I'm talking about. Or neo-colonial. I'm not talking about the colonial one. It is the same term that many people use in many other countries in Africa, Latin America too, and also in Asian countries. They use the word neo-colonial or post-colonial, doesn't mean the colonial. It's just after colonization, but the point is they are still trying to dominate you or have been dominating you regardless of your colonial independence. That is what they mean by the term. So you are independent politically in the normal sense, but in reality you are controlled by them.
Fair enough. I'm sorry we're running out of time.
Yeah.
It's a lovely piece of time having a chat with you.
Yeah.
Professor. Thank you very much for the time spending with us. And